Kia ora, welcome to Paws for Thought. This week we'll talk about what you need to know before you bring a dog into your family. How long will the dog live? And how will the dog be cared for while family members are at school or work? We'll also speak to Food Safety Minister Nikki Kaye about National's policy on animal welfare. We sent the Animal Agenda Aotearoa to all 10 main political parties and then gave them a mark out of 10 based on their responses. Which parties have the best animal welfare policies? We'll discuss that later in the program. But first, let's welcome vet Dr. Elsa Flint to talk about dogs and whether getting a puppy for your children is a good idea. Kia ora, Elsa, welcome to the program.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me here.
Good to have you. What do people need to think about before bringing a dog into their family?
I think they need to consider particularly time and the commitment they have to that animal, because what you have to remember is when you get a puppy, you're going to have that animal for at least 10 years in most cases, and often up to 15. So you have to look ahead and consider whether or not you're going to be able to commit to that animal and care for it for all of that time. So that's probably the biggest thing. And then more short term, how are they set up within the home environment? So how are they placed with fenced properties? Is everything nice and safe and secure for the dog or the puppy that they're going to get? And what are they going to do during the day? Are they all working, or are there people at home? Because really I think that if people are going to be working for 8-hour days, they shouldn't get a puppy. It's as simple as that. Unless they have the ability to send it to daycare, or they've got someone who can babysit or come in the middle of the day and take the puppy out or dog out later in life. I think it's really too much to ask for a dog to stay at home alone for 8 hours while the owners are away.
It's actually very cruel, isn't it? Both the last places I've lived at, next door there's been dogs home alone all day, and the second one actually got depressed. You know, it was just horrendous to watch. So people, you either need to, someone needs to be home with the dog, you take the dog to work, or the dog goes to daycare.
Yes, that's right. And when they first get a puppy too, a lot of people get puppies when their children are home from school on holiday, and that's really common around Christmas time and so on. And that's nice, but what you have to remember is that you can't suddenly go back to work and school and leave this little mite on its own, because it's had company all the way through up until then. So they have to know about preparing the puppy for some time spent alone. And, you know, with the best will in the world, there's going to be time when we have to leave our dogs or puppies alone for some time during the day. So we have to prepare them for that and not leave them suddenly when that happens.
And so you were mentioning how long dogs can live, up to perhaps 15 years. So obviously if you're thinking that the family might move overseas or something, then it's not a good idea to get the dog, is it?
No, I think you have to be pretty stable really, and, you know, as I say, plan ahead. So people who are here on short-term contracts from overseas, it's probably not a good idea to get a dog unless they're prepared to take it with them, and they certainly can travel. I mean, it's quite well, I wouldn't say easy, but you certainly can take dogs to and from the UK now, and from Europe reasonably straightforwardly, because they've got the pet passport system. So you don't have the prolonged quarantines that we used to have. So, you know, that's possible, but it costs money, and you have to know that, you know, if that's on the agenda, you've got to be able to know that you can afford it, and you'll be able to do that for the animal.
It's quite traumatic for the dog too, isn't it?
It's quite a big journey, yeah.
Yeah.
So not something to do lightly.
And how do people work out what sort of breed of dog would be the best for their family?
I think it's really important for people to try to do a pre-pet counselling session, if you like, or go and see their veterinarian and sit down with the vet or one of the nursing staff and just talk through what might be an appropriate animal for them. So certainly breeds, it's quite important to choose the right one for your situation. And if you're a very active family, you've got teenage children who run and you're into physical activity too, then maybe you can get something like a Dalmatian or you know, a breed that likes to run with you. If you're not so active, then, you know, the last thing you want is a dog that needs a high level of activity every day. So you need to think about that. That's probably the number one issue. Also in suburban situations there's a big problem with barking now, and people don't like to tolerate barking. So breeds that are less prone to barking probably are better choices for suburban situations. So you wouldn't, for instance, choose a Hunterway because the Hunterway is bred for barking. They're also big active dogs and they need lots of exercise and activity. So you wouldn't want to put that in a suburban garden and not be able to provide the activity and interest that it needed. Also, you'd have a natural tendency to bark, so that could be a problem. They bark sort of very, very easily at very little stimulus. Other breeds that bark a lot would be things like Schnauzers. So the Schnauzers are very good guards and they're very reactive. They tend to bark probably a lot more than other little dogs naturally. And so, if you're in a situation where you've got a lot of close neighbours and a lot of stimulus that might trigger territorial barking, probably not such a good dog to get. So just things like that, thinking about situations. If they have children, I think people need to consider the age of the children. And I personally think that you shouldn't get a dog or a puppy until your youngest child is 5. Because from what I've seen in practice, children have a good empathy level from that point onwards, but prior to that they don't really seem to be able to empathise with other animals and creatures. And so until that ability to empathise kicks in, they find it difficult to interact with the puppy. So there's often a lot of friction and a few problems arising with the puppy jumping at the child and so on, and the child not understanding what the puppy needs and how to handle it.
And lots of people get dogs or other animals because the children say they want them, but of course after a couple of weeks it's very common for the children to lose interest, but you've still got a living creature who's part of your family and dependent on you.
That's right, yes, and I think the big thing with children too is, every puppy in existence is going to be jumping and mouthing when it's little. It's what they do, they all do it, and it takes a while for them to settle down and get through that. Very little children can't cope with that. They get frightened, the puppy jumps and mouths them and it hurts a bit, so they scream and then they flap around and the puppy gets excited. So it's hard for people to manage that. So I think that it's important that we think about that, and unfortunately we seem to have this impression within society that puppies will naturally recognise that baby children are to be, you have to treat them with care and you can't nip them and so on. And I think if we look at the advertisement for toilet paper that's on sometimes, and the puppy pushes the toilet roll so that the little boy doesn't fall on the ground and sits nicely on the toilet roll. It doesn't happen in real life. I haven't seen it. So, I think people have to understand the reality of having a puppy and young children, and it's not easy. Mothers often struggle with that.
And also, you're not really getting a puppy, you're actually getting a dog, because the dog's only going to be a cute little puppy for a short time.
Yes, that's right. So if you then have to think about how you're going to manage the needs of the puppy with the needs of little toddlers, and is that going to work? Are you going to be able to take it out walking with them and so forth? So it's often very, very hard on the mothers, and I've had many people who come to puppy school and say to me, look, if I'd known how hard it was, I would never have gone there until my youngest was older, But having said that, when they are older, children have a tremendous rapport with puppies, and if they learn to deal with them the right way, and they can be wonderful pets and wonderful friends for them as they get older, and particularly in the teenage years.
And a good way of teaching empathy. Thanks very much, Elsa. Now it's time for the Pause for Thought win and fail of the week. The Pause for Thought win goes to the animal advocates from Hoo Ha and Farm Watch, who last week went on a South Island road trip to rescue and rehome hens from a Dunedin battery farm. 300 hens needed new homes after the farm shut down. Farm Watch last year filmed the animals in cramped and inhumane conditions. Hoo Ha co-founder Carolyn Press-McKenzie and Farm Watch's Jasmine Gray drove a truck from Wellington to Otago to collect the hens and then drop them off at their new homes. Some are now living in Mosgiel, others are in Christchurch and Blenheim, and the rest came to the North Island. You can watch the 3 News story about the rescue and road trip on the 3 News website. Search Battery Hen Rescue. The Pause for Thought fail goes to New Zealand's lack of proper labelling laws, which mean that consumers are misled about the way their pork and eggs are produced. The public has recently been shocked by horrific pictures of the conditions on some pig farms in New Zealand. A farm where pigs were seen with rats running through their pens and dead pigs among the live animals had a Pig Care label. The label was created in 2009 following earlier footage of pigs being kept in appalling conditions. It's supposed to guarantee that farms comply with the Pig Code of Welfare based on a yearly audit. However, New Zealand's animal welfare laws are so ineffectual that many of the practices seen in the footage are not actually illegal. Many consumers mistakenly think that the labels 100% New Zealand pork and Pig Care accredited mean that the pigs are kept in good conditions. The New Zealand pork auditor and vet said that Pig Care is not the panacea that you think it is. Pig products imported from overseas are also produced in horrific conditions. As we talked about last week, the Animal Agenda Aotearoa is a 10-point plan to improve the welfare of animals in New Zealand this year. The agenda covers policies such as banning factory farming by 2017, banning party pill testing on animals, then banning cosmetic testing and moving to a complete prohibition on using animals for testing. We're also calling for better shelter and transport for animals and a Commissioner for Animals to police and enforce welfare. We wrote to the 10 main political parties asking for their responses to the animal agenda. We then gave each of them a mark out of 10. The Internet Party scored the highest, with 10 out of 10 for agreeing to implement all of the animal agenda. The Greens were second with 8.5, and the Mana Party was third with 8. Labour received a mark of 5, while United Future and the Māori Party received 4. National and New Zealand First scored 1. ACT and the Conservatives were marked 0, as they did not respond. Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Kaye, was not available to be interviewed for Paws for Thought. So, to talk more about National's animal welfare policy, I'm joined by Food Safety Minister, Nikki Kaye. Kia ora, Nikki, welcome to the program.
Kia ora, talo whalava.
Did you grow up with animals in your family?
Yes, I did. I had Muppy, who was a cat from a very young age, and she lived till I was about 21. Then I had Five, who was also a cat at university.
So I'm guessing are cats your favourite animals?
Yes, they are. In fact, if you look at my Facebook page and you look at when I go door knocking, I think you'll find quite a few pictures of cats.
Good way to meet people. The government was applauded for finally deciding this year that there would be no animal testing for psychoactive substances. Why did the government decide that?
Oh, well, I think there's, quite a significant debate about it. I think, we were always really clear we didn't want psychoactive substances really on shelves. The question was, how do you get them off shelves if they're causing harm? And I think there was a huge discussion in terms of animal testing, and ultimately some of these issues are ethical issues, and I think people were concerned that maybe there would be harm caused to people if the regime was in place, and we ended up saying, well, actually we think from an ethical perspective that this can't be justified, and that's why we made the decision we made the decision.
And would the government now be considering banning testing of cosmetics on animals in New Zealand? I mean, it doesn't actually happen at the moment, but I know that people would like to have it written into law.
Well, look, I think you're right, it doesn't happen at the moment, but I think, like every political party, we're looking at what our animal welfare policies might be for the election. I mean, we've already announced some things, but I think there will be a debate in New Zealand about the ethics around recreational testing, and cosmetics obviously comes into that for many people. I think, obviously Nathan Kaye is our spokesperson, so we'll see what happens.
Do you think we need to test on animals at all now? In 2014 there's so many other ways of testing: in vitro cell culture, microdosing, use of human skin for irritancy tests.
Oh, look, I think it's really important that we do quite a lot more to look at those alternatives. I think that, from talking to a lot of people, particularly whether it's door knocking or even in the science community, I think the question is, for certain drugs and medical purposes, is it the case that we still need animal testing to make the kind of advances that we need to? Again, I think that some of it will be a case-by-case basis. I mean, we have the ethics committee that look at various applications, but you know, I sort of sense that there are more and more people that are asking the right questions, and there is good investment and good progress in other alternatives, and we should be investing in them.
Do you think it's realistic for New Zealand to aim to be the first country in the world to ban all testing on animals?
I actually don't know the answer to that. You know, I think the only way you can answer that question is to have a very good understanding of where your research and science is going to be based in the future. I think we put a huge amount more money into research and innovation, but undoubtedly if you made that decision then you would be cutting off certain areas of research and development, and I think we've got to have a proper informed debate about what those areas would be. I know that people care very passionately about these issues. I think there is a bit of political momentum to do more. I can sense that as well in terms of the public. New Zealand public are demanding that, and so I think throughout the selection campaign we'll see more and more people talking about that.
What's the government's policy on the future of battery hen cages, sow stalls and farrow and crates?
Well, look, in terms of sow stalls, my understanding is they'll be out by end of 2015. In terms of battery cages, the date is 2022, but there's a number of things within there around replacements and when they have to occur. In terms of farrow and crates, I don't believe that there is a plan at the moment to ban them. I know that there is going to be more political momentum over the coming period. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that there will be some New Zealanders that feel very passionately about this, and the main thing is that we get the right people in the room in terms of both animal welfare advocates and industry. You know, from my experience as a politician, if you have campaigns where you don't have the kind of leadership for people to actually get around the table and possibly work through how some of these issues might actually get on the table and be resolved, then we'll have people talking at each other. And the more political consensus that we can get on this as well, I think is really important. I don't see it as a left or right issue. I actually see it as one that in some cases is a question of ethics, and in other cases it may be a question of just really getting the right leaders around the table and working through, you know, what may be a phased approach.
What do you think when you see those horrendous pictures of hens and pigs?
Well, obviously it's upsetting. I think I do think that there are many New Zealanders that would feel that way. There will be other New Zealanders that don't care, right? And I think one thing I've learnt in politics is you never assume that everybody thinks the same way that you do. But I mean, I do care pretty passionately about these issues. I do understand sometimes there needs to be a pragmatic approach. If you're going to, because if you take something like battery cages, yeah, there'll be some people that will sit there and say, well, you would pretty much put a whole lot of businesses under and a whole lot of families would be out of work, and the harm or the loss from those families being out of work. Some people would say, well, that's the balance between animal welfare. You know, I think there's more that we can do. Because even if people don't care from an animal welfare point of view, surely from an economic argument, doesn't the government and don't New Zealanders think that it's just incredibly damaging to our international reputation? Those pictures always go overseas, and we seem to set the bar so low. Why don't we try and boost our economy by, you know, saying that we're #1 in the world for animal welfare and actually being it by banning all these and attracting a premium? And I'm sure that's the debate that we're going to have. I mean, I'm Minister of Food Safety, so one thing that I'm very aware of is the whole issue of ethical labelling, and I think that is more and more coming to the forefront. I was recently at the Australia-New Zealand Ministers Forum, and we've got a labelling logic review, but whether it's issues of palm oil or animal welfare, I think there is probably more that we can do around the transparency of food companies and where they source their products, whether that is necessarily just labelling, whether that is using technology to provide that information. I do think that's an important area in encouraging people to be informed to make choices about who they may or may not support ethically, and I think we'll see more of that as well.
And we'll have some announcements from National between now and the election about animal welfare?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you'll be aware that we've already obviously announced things like sow stalls and battery cages. We've got the animal welfare bill that is before Parliament, and there's been a lot of work that's done on that. But, you know, we'll be clear through the election campaign on any other policies that come up.
Thanks very much, Nikki.
Thank you.
Now it's time for News of the Week. The future of elephants is under threat as they are increasingly targeted by poachers, both for ivory and to use the animals in tourism. Wild elephants are being captured and tortured before being smuggled from Myanmar to Thailand to be used as tourist attractions. Young elephants receive the most attention from tourists, so older herd members are often shot when the young animals are captured. The baby elephants are repeatedly beaten to make them submissive before they're sold to tourist operators. Every year, Guy Fawkes celebrations result in animals being injured, killed or permanently lost when they run away after being spooked by fireworks and never find their way home again. A petition at change.org is calling for a ban on the public sale of fireworks. Australia did this years ago. Protests against the factory farming of pigs will be held in Auckland and Dunedin on Saturday, 26 July at 1 p.m. The demonstrations aim to press for better treatment of pigs and show the public's abhorrence at the recent footage of pigs kept in awful conditions. You can find more information about the protests on Facebook. Raju the elephant was rescued after more than 50 years of abuse. He'd been shackled with chains, beaten severely and repeatedly, and forced to consume plastic and paper to survive. Raju won international fame when he was rescued on American Independence Day this year, July the 4th, and was seen weeping as he was led to freedom. The elephant had been living in Uttar Pradesh in India and was rescued in a midnight operation by a 10-strong team of vets and wildlife officers from North London charity Wildlife SOS. They were joined by 20 forestry workers and 6 police officers. Raju was driven 350 miles to the Elephant Conservation and Care Centre in northern India. There he met Pulkali, an elephant rescued 2 years ago after she was found starving in a deserted, windowless warehouse. Pulkali insisted on sharing her evening snack with Raju, who feasted on mangoes, jackfruit, bananas and biscuits. A book called Judy, A Dog in a Million, written by Damien Lewis, has been published and tells the story of English pointer Judy, the only animal prisoner of war during World War II. Judy was in a Japanese prisoner of war camp and became the friend of British, American, Australian and other Allied forces. Australia's Lost Dogs Home has found new homes for dogs by introducing the animals to office workers during their lunch breaks. The Human Walking program gets office workers to come out of their cubicles and spend their lunch breaks engaging with dogs in the middle of the city. Homes were found for 5,000 dogs living at the shelter. An American firefighter has saved a dog's life by performing CPR on the animal. Pony the Chihuahua was travelling in a car when the engine suddenly caught fire and flames quickly spread through the vehicle. Yvette Childers escaped from the car, but Pony was trapped inside as she was confined to a cage. Firefighters were quickly on the scene and used hatchets to force their way into the vehicle. Pony was found lying on her side, lifeless. Captain Scott Leday took off his helmet and mask and started doing CPR. He spent 30 minutes doing CPR and chest compressions until Pony started showing signs of life. After suffering a seizure, The dog began gasping for air and blinking her eyes. Within an hour, she was back on her feet. A new study has revealed that chimpanzees get half of their intelligence through their genes, while the other half comes from environmental factors. The research found that intelligence was passed down through genes in chimpanzees exactly the same way as human intelligence is conveyed. The Vancouver Humane Society is calling for a safety review of the annual Calgary Stampede after a horse died during training for the yearly chuckwagon race. Peter Fricker said that ex-thoroughbred racers were used in the event and it was possible they were not well suited to the race. He said horses were repeatedly suffering in the event and it was time it was suspended. That's our program for this week. You can find the Animal Agenda Aotearoa's website and Facebook page at the addresses shown on screen. On the website, please click on the tab Email Your MP to let your MP know you want change for animals. On our Facebook page, we're suggesting one 3-minute action you can do every day to help animals. Look out for these and then ask 10 of your friends to do the actions as well. And join us next week when we'll talk about the intelligence of pigs and hear about Labour's animal welfare policy. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.